Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here and sharing this incredible gathering. So without further ado, I'll share my screen. Um, and let's see. I think I want to make this a little bit bigger. So today I have the privilege and the challenge of sharing my faith, which is the Baha'i faith. And I think the Baha'i faith can be principally summed up in this concept of world unity. The focus of the Baha'i faith is the unity of the human race, and that this is the era in which this is both possible and inevitable. So one of my favorite quotes from the Baha'i faith from Baha'u'llah, the prophet and founder of the Baha'i faith, is, "Let your vision be world embracing." The earth is but one country and mankind its citizens. So our theme today obviously is peace, and this is a particularly significant principle in the Baha'i faith because the perspective of Baha'is is that this is the era of peace. This is the era of the inevitability of peace, how challenging it is to get to that peace, how much humanity has to suffer before we recognize our essential unity. This is in the hands of human beings. But that this is the promised day of God, and this is the day in which the lamb and the wolf will lie down together, and that world peace is within our future, within our reach. So for the first time in history, it's possible for everyone to view the entire planet. This is the reality of our world today. We have the capacity, both visually, to view our planet in a way that wasn't possible, obviously in the time of the religions of the past, and that we now have a world vision that is simply wasn't possible. We see ourselves, we see our fellow human beings and our planet. And this vision and the knowledge that we are all part of this planet is ultimately going to lead to world peace. So I'm going to try to encapsulate both my own story and some of the principles of the Baha'i faith today. I'm going to start with the principles, and there's a lot of them, and they're really great. So I'm going to try to go through them as thoroughly, but as briefly as I can, so we get the idea. And then I'm going to share a little bit about my story and kind of what inspired me to embrace this faith. So a few of the principal tenets of the Baha'i faith is that this is the era of the unity and oneness of the human race, that every human being is inherently noble, that there is the fundamental equality between men and women that has always been the case in the eyes of God, but is only now possible in this era of our human evolution. And that there is harmony between science and religion. There is no conflict, that they both enhance each other. Science is the physical world's manifestation of God's love. If we look around us and we learn from the world around us, what is our reality? What are the rules of nature? What are the rules of chemistry and biology? All of these things lead to a knowledge of God. And ultimately, these are doors that open to us a further vista on religion. So they both enhance the understanding of each other. Religion also inspires science, right? Because science, if we look at it through the lens of a spiritual lens, we look at it differently than if we view it materially. For example, the development of atomic energy. This can be put to tremendous use for the betterment of humankind. It can also be used for extreme destruction. And this is the reason that science must be illumined by religion and by faith. Baha'u'llah, again, the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith, these are his words. "That which the Lord hath ordained as the sovereign remedy and mightiest instrument for the healing of all the world is the union of all its peoples in one universal cause and one common faith." So religion and its remedy and the beauty of the teachings of these, we'll talk about the Baha'i perspective, but these messengers of God is the healing remedy for all of society's ills. As I mentioned, the Baha'i faith is the principal purpose is to unite all peoples and races in one common faith. And we believe that traditions of every people contain the promise of a future when peace and harmony will be established on earth, that the promised day is here. I'm almost a little bit emotional when I say that because it's such a beautiful thing to say. And we are now possible for humanity to build a new world. So kind of maybe the description, the baseline description of Baha'i belief about God and his creation is that throughout all the ages, there has been a succession of divine messengers known as manifestations of God because they manifest the message of God. And their purpose is to educate and guide humanity and awaken in human beings the capacity to contribute to the advancement of civilization to an extent never before possible. So when we look at the religious traditions throughout all of history, every divine messenger, whether it's Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, Krishna, these are all divine messengers, and their purpose has all been the same, to awaken us to the ability to contribute to our own advancement as a human race. So you can see this is a really helpful a graphic that shows kind of the Baha'i belief that God's faith evolves. And then, we just mentioned Abraham, Krishna, Moses. We're just hearing about the faiths from the wonderful speakers today of these messengers. So Baha'is view them as all part of one faith. God reveals himself over time, and he speaks through the language or through the mouths of these divine messengers who came at different periods in human history to different parts of the world to share this one unfolding faith of God. And so these divine educators' teachings have provided for the basis for the advancement of civilization. And Baha'is believe that Baha'u'llah is the latest of these messengers, and that his teachings explain that the religions of the world are successive chapters of one faith. And as I said, that they bring this unified, continuous series of teachings from God, revealing the spiritual knowledge humanity needs at the time that they appeared. So they're one unbroken chain of wisdom and guidance for humanity, but their teachings are slightly different depending on the requirements and nature of human society at that time, both in the world collectively as well as within the direct place in the world where they came. As I mentioned, Baha'u'llah, whose name, this is his title, his name means the glory of God, is the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith. And we believe that he's brought the teachings that humanity needs for our particular issues at this present time. So as I mentioned, it is possible through science and all of the creative powers released in the world for us to recognize our unity, for us to travel around the world. We can get on planes, we can see each other on the internet, we can see images from space, things that were never before possible in past faiths, at the time of past faiths, is possible now. And so Baha'u'llah's teachings follow within the context of what we are now capable of perceiving in the sense of this concept of our world being one. We believe that after a manifestation of God, and again, the manifestation of God refers to these messengers, Abraham, Buddha, Jesus, etc., that there's a human society is reshaped. If you look at the history of, the religions of God, Jesus' teachings, look at from this one humble man in Israel, in the Holy Land, the entire Western world was transformed, and human society was reshaped. And we are moving towards this organization of human society as a planetary civilization in today's era. So the purpose of the manifestation of God have all been the same, even though the message is slightly different depending on the conditions. They are the light bringers of the world. They bring truth. They bring love. They bring the message of God. And excuse me, this is supposed to say releases a fresh outpouring of spirit into creation. So they're the word of God that streams from their particular mouth at that time in history has a power that regenerates human society, that opens the hearts of human beings. And so we believe that new forces are released that permeate human society and develop the consciousness in society further than was possible prior to the coming of that particular messenger. So if, this graphic again is kind of helpful. It's obviously, simplifying very complex things. But if we look at the evolution of humankind, as I mentioned, if we're looking back to the earlier faiths, the focus at that time was more on the unity of the family. As these faiths continued throughout history, we became more unified as tribes. And then the concept of a city-state became possible as society advanced. Then even the concept of a nation. And now in the era of the Baha'i faith, we believe that the concept is now world unity. So it's always been about unity and love and cohesion. It's simply that the circle of that unity has expanded as each messenger of God brought a fresh and new message for society as it was advancing. So, what is the crucial need for humanity at this day and age, this era of God's religion, is the crucial need to find a unifying vision of ourselves and our society. And Baha'is believe that the vision that can guide us through what that means in this turbulent era, when people are, at war, when people are infinitely far from recognizing the unity of our human species, the Baha'u'llah has brought teachings that can guide and unite us. So as I mentioned, this is the era, the coming of age of the entire human race. We are now at our collective maturity. We have capacity that we never had in the past. So we're now in the period of adolescence where there's turbulence and there's great growth and great, all the things that teenagers embody: hope, just the search for justice, empowerment, and also a little bit of the confusion, the confusion and the kind of misdirected impulses. And so that's where we are. We're poised for our collective maturity. And this maturity will involve the consciousness of world citizenship, the founding of a world civilization and culture, and that this is the furthermost limit of the organization of human society, which is why we believe it's the promised day. We have arrived. We have arrived at the promises of the past in all the religious faiths. So I'm going to go through, probably faster than I should, some of the principles of the Baha'i faith, because these principles, although some of them have existed in the past, I would describe it as fleshed out. There's more information given with this new revelation in a way that has introduced both new concepts and reinvigorated concepts that formerly existed. So the first and probably the most, basic concept of the Baha'i faith is that we must search for truth, that we all have the responsibility of investigating our own reality. Every individual now today with increasing access to knowledge, increasing literacy, increasing capacity of human beings to learn and to know, we are each responsible for our own search for truth, and that requires us to set aside superstitions, beliefs, and traditions that we're blindly imitating. Not the beautiful teachings that come and inspire us, but blind imitation of ancestral forms of religion that may have, to some extent, veered from the actual teachings of that manifestation of God, whoever brought this message. And we can see that in all faiths, that there has been a veering away, and misguided to some extent among some religious leaders, and leading people astray, whether it's to, from the beautiful faith of becoming a terrorist, or whatever thing can happen where a faith can go astray. And we'll talk more about that, veering away from the beautiful teachings of that manifestation. And that through this search from truth, the religions and nations of the world will become one, because when we investigate reality with an open and unbiased mind, we will see that we are one, and that there's no distinction truly between us. Again, this idea of mankind being one, that this is the recognition of the oneness of the world of humanity. And he says, "You are all the leaves of one, you're all the fruits of one branch and the leaves of one tree, that there are no differences or distinctions of race among you in the sight of God." And so in this day, Baha'u'llah has established that there is no other. In the past, there has been this concept of the believer and the unbeliever, and maybe those who maybe were saved and those who were not be saved. And in the Baha'i faith, we have now established there is no other. Every human being is on this tree of a fruit of the tree of humanity, and we are all ultimately going to move forward towards this goal of unity. Whether or not we get on board right away, whether or not we open our minds truly to the investigation of truth, there will be some delay depending on the capacity of the individuals, every human soul, to do that. But ultimately, this is where we're going, and this is where we're going to end up. I kind of said this in the first one, but the independent investigation of reality. So we must search for truth, and we must do it independently. There's slightly a difference there. And that in order to find truth, we must give up our prejudices. As I said, an open and receptive mind is essential. And Baha'u'llah says, "The essence of all that we have revealed for thee is justice. For man to free himself from idle fancy and imitation, discern with the eye of oneness his glorious handiwork, and look into all things with a searching eye. And this refers to either our search for religious truth or for scientific truth or whatever truth there is. We believe that truth is ultimately all leading to one thing, which is the common unity of the human race, the unity of God, and the oneness of those teachings in this day and age. And this is a nice quote that I love. If we are earnestly seeking the truth, we look for it everywhere. Men and women being equal is one of my absolute favorites because it's such a beautiful one. And as I mentioned, we believe that this has always been true in God's sight. Simply it wasn't applicable at that time in human history. So although God has always believed and known that men and women are equal, it's now time for the realization and recognition of that. And one of the beautiful teachings of this is that women will be, in the Baha'i faith, we're told, when we've achieved full equality, we will basically put our foot down. There will be no more war, and that the end of warfare on the face of the earth is the result of the fruition of the equality of men and women. And Abdul Baha, the son of Baha'u'llah, is the teacher of the author of some of these quotes. And he basically says that the highest social development of mankind won't be possible until women are given equal access to education, equal rights, and the recognition of our equality. And that in past ages, humanity has essentially been defective. We didn't reach the highest level of our attainment. And as a result, war and its ravages have blighted the world. And that the education of women will be a mighty step towards its abolition and ending, because she will use her whole influence against war. Women simply will not allow our children to be, I'm almost going to cry. We'll never allow our children to be sacrificed. It's simply part of who we are. So she will be the greatest factor in establishing universal peace and international arbitration. This idea that as I mentioned, science and religion are go hand in hand. And Baha'u'llah's teachings say that religion must be in conformity with science and science and reason. If it doesn't conform to reason, it's superstition. So, if we hold to a religious belief that doesn't fall within science, it is not true religion. And that religion and science are two wings upon which man's intelligence can soar to the heights with which the human soul can progress. And to clarify, this doesn't mean that the teachings of the past of the way the Bible describes evolution is necessarily incorrect. It simply means that the way perhaps we've interpreted those allegories are not are yet to be fulfilled with the addition of science and reason. So they do correspond. As I mentioned, this idea that religions should unite. Religion must be a source of unity and fellowship. And if it's not, it's preferable that it doesn't exist. Simply, if it can't do what it's meant to do, and it's carried into this conflict between people, basically taken away exactly from what the purpose is, and has become a cause of hatred and division, it would be better for the world to be without religion. And that is the basic Baha'i principle of what religion should do. It should unite and it should bring about love. It's time for us to abandon our prejudices. This is one of the fundamental purposes of the Baha'i faith. Prejudice must be abandoned and entirely removed. The world cannot attain peace, prosperity, and composure when we hold to prejudices that are incorrect and misleading. So this idea is that prejudice and fanaticism, from whatever source it comes, political, religious, denominational, patriotic, these are destructive to the foundations of human solidarity. And so man must release himself from these bonds in order for our oneness to become manifest. The promotion of world peace, as I mentioned, universal peace is assured by Baha'u'llah. It will come about, and that this peace will prevail among all the nations of the world. It's one of the characteristic teachings of this day and age. Education for all. This is the era of education for all. We have now the means to access information. It's not that we were living in the medieval times when people didn't read and write and they had to use religious leaders to interpret for them. We now have the capacity for our own education, and that this is a necessary principle of this day. And so this is a beautiful quote from Baha'u'llah. Regard man as a mind rich in gems of inestimable value. Education can alone cause it to reveal its treasures and enable mankind to benefit therefrom. So essentially, if we don't educate ourselves, we cannot reach within the mind of ourselves and contribute to the advancement of civilization and to the advancement of this promise of world peace and the day of God. So absolutely, we must all be educated and have access to information and knowledge. Economic problems need spiritual solutions. Essentially, we're trying to fix all the problems with the world, with laws and with, all kinds of things that don't involve spiritual enlightenment. And so essentially, when we unite, when we see our fundamental unity, and when we approach human affairs from the standpoint of spirituality, these solutions will become evident to us. It will become evident, clear as day, when we approach it with that perspective. It's time for a universal auxiliary language. And what does this mean? We all need to have and learn a language that we can communicate with each other. We can maintain our personal languages. This is going to happen. This is part of the beauty of the diversity of human affairs. But it's time for us to be able to hear each other and be able to, unfiltered, hear the voices of people of diverse faiths and diverse places in the world and understand their perspective, and that this will foster international communication and remove misunderstandings and difficulties. Work is worship. This is one of the great ones for people who, like myself, who are exhausted from working and try to have, at the end of the day, a time of spirituality and relaxation. And sometimes that's hard. And so this is one of the beautiful teachings that basically says that if you're doing your work in a spirit of service to humankind, this is counted as worship. God is checking off that box and saying, you did well today. I'm going to count that as worship of God. The elimination of extremes of wealth and poverty. This is just basic in understanding. If you look at the world from a spiritual lens, it doesn't make sense. We can't have extremes of wealth and poverty. We're not all going to be the same. We're all have different inclinations and different capacities. But this idea of extreme wealth and extreme poverty is simply contrary to a person of spiritual lens, a person with faith in God. And so simply this has to be abolished, and we all have to have access to means with which we can live with dignity, and to that extent. So there's more principles of the faith that I can't share today, but this idea that with every religious manifestation, new principles come into effect, and Abdu'l-Baha describes this as a new garment, as if, this is a new age. We put on our collective humanity, we put on a new garment, and we have now access to, I read this, out of this pitch blackness, there dawned the morning splendor of the teachings of Baha'u'llah. He hath dressed the world in a garment that is new and fair, and that new garment is the principles which have come down from God. And we can see this echoed in the religions of the past when Christ talks about putting, you can't put wine into old wineskins, you have to have new wineskins. This is that concept of we have now new teachings. We can't use all the stuff of the past. We have to move forward with what's there for us and what is rich from us. It doesn't mean we cast away what was of the past. It means that we have new information and we must embrace that so that we can advance as a civilization. And so just what is the point of all this? If these messengers of God don't change us, don't revolutionize us both collectively and individually, there's really no point to the messenger of God coming, right? That is the purpose. And these are Baha'u'llah's words, is not the object of every revelation to effect a transformation in the whole character of mankind, a transformation that shall manifest itself both outwardly and inwardly, and shall affect both its inner life and external conditions. For if the character of man be not changed, the futility of God's universal manifestation would be apparent. And we can see this in the faiths of the past, the spread of Islam, the spread of Judaism, the spread of Christianity, how these things transform society and spread throughout the world. And that's what we're talking about these teachings have to have that effect on humankind. So I'm going to shift a little bit into my personal story. I wanted to give you the background of the faith so that you could kind of see how I embrace this and why. So I've lived a life of tremendous, tremendous struggle, a lot of emotional pain. I'll talk about it a little bit. And one of the things that well, the thing that has saved my life, is this idea that everything in God, everything that happens to us in life has a purpose, that God, puts challenges in our way. Sometimes they're created by other human beings, but those challenges can, if we see them through the right lens, um, advance our character and our spiritual path. And I love this quote from Baha'u'llah. He says, "I have ordained for thy training every atom in existence and the essence of all created things." In other words, everything that happens is a part of your spiritual path. And if you're able to view it through that lens and embrace it in that way, you can progress spiritually, even though it may cause you suffering. So my personal journey, I became a Baha'i when I was 17. Even as a young child, I saw the injustice and the idea that perhaps I was saved, raised as a Christian, that I was saved, and that my friend, whose parents were Chinese, wasn't saved. It just, to me, even as maybe an 8-year-old child, I was like, well, how does that make sense? How could a just God, punish a child who simply was following the teachings of her parents as I was following teachings of my parents? So from a young age, I saw this and I just, something about it didn't make sense to me. This just God, how would he do that? How would he just, based on where you come from, you're either part of the in saved crowd or not. And so I was very attracted to this Baha'i concept of the oneness of humanity, and this idea that, God is giving a faith to every human being on earth, and that's the purpose of this day and age. And that made sense to me when I'm talking about a just and merciful God. Wouldn't he want to have all of his creatures and all of his children have access to being saved, to their souls progressing? So this idea of the oneness of humanity and the commitment of Baha'is to the elimination of prejudices, to my 17-year-old psyche and heart, this made perfect sense. This is what the world needed. And so I embraced it. I came from a Christian background, but I embraced this, thinking to myself, this makes sense for the day and age in which we live. And again, this concept of religions being fundamentally one faith, all of this made perfect sense to me on a rational level. And after becoming a Baha'i, my worldview completely shifted. I made the decision to leave the elite private school that I was studying at when I saw things around me with racism and sexism, and I just said, this doesn't make sense. This can't be all there is to it. And so I left school. I actually left before I graduated. I later progressed with my career, but I left at the age of 17, and I made the decision to go to Mexico, to serve the Baha'i faith. And I had the incredible bounty and blessing of living with an indigenous family, a Baha'i family in Mexico, in a part called La Huasteca Potosina. And this was my period of service to the faith. And when I say I served, I basically received. Everything that I did there was a drop in the bucket compared to what I learned and what I walked away with. So in my particular journey, I was seeking certitude, searching for healing, asking God for his assistance. And this is a beautiful quote from Baha'u'llah. And he says, "Oh, my friend, listen with heart and soul to the songs of the Spirit and treasure them as thine own eyes." So essentially, listen to your heart, listen to your spirit, and this will guide you, to your spiritual path. And again, kind of this idea of searching for answers, independently investigating truth. Baha'u'llah says, only when the lamp of search, of earnest striving, of longing desire, of passionate devotion is kindled within the seeker's heart, will the lights of knowledge and certitude envelop his being. Meaning, if you want to know the truth, do so with passion, with conviction, search it out. Look everywhere you can see. That everywhere you search will ultimately lead you to the one path if you're looking with an open and unbiased mind. So part of what happened that led me to the Baha'i faith was that I became extremely, extremely stricken with depression as a early adolescent and later in my adolescence. And it just made me say, what is the purpose? What is there? And it gave me this drive to find a path, make it make sense. And as I said, this gave me this idea that didn't matter how much I was suffering, there was a greater purpose behind the suffering. There was a path I was being pushed down, and that this allowed me to push through with the strength day after day, year after year. And this basically kept me alive. There's no doubt in my mind I would have taken my own life, or I probably would have succumbed to addiction to deal with the agony that I was in. And after many, many years of just, daily get through the day, try to find purpose, try to be of service, try to advance myself in my education so that I could serve, I gradually became aware of the tremendous gift of what I had lived through. And as well as the depression I struggled with, or alongside it, my mom passed away when I was in my early 20s, and I was really in the deepest part of my depression. And then she became ill, and then she passed away fairly quickly after she was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. And this was a prayer I used to say. I may cry, so I try not to. And she said, and the Abdul Baha'u'llah says, "Glory to thee, O my God, but for the tribulations which is sustained in thy path." I'm sorry, I can't read it. You can read it. So within that prayer, it says, this is so beautiful to me. It describes the agony that we go through when we lose someone or when we're struggling. "The companions of all who adore thee are the tears they shed, and the comforters of such as seek thee are the groans they utter. And the food of them who haste to meet me is the fragments of their broken hearts." So one of the Baha'i beliefs is that when a pure soul passes on, that they have power and influence in the world. They release from their own passing this fresh impulse to humanity and this fresh power and gladness that can help us. And one of the darkest periods of my life, when I was literally walking away from school and from anything that could have, that I needed to advance myself and to serve. I prayed, and I just said that one day I was about to walk away from my career, from school, from everything. And I prayed one of the particularly potent Baha'i prayers. And the minute I finished that prayer, I just heard this word, fight. And it was just, that was my answer. You can't leave. You can't let it go. You have to fight, and you have to persist. And there's a particular story in the Baha'i faith that made this understanding of meaning and suffering make sense. And it was this story about a lover and his beloved, and how they're separated, and he's searching for so many years for the woman that he loves. And he becomes more and more depressed as he cannot find her. He doesn't know where, perhaps this was the time in the past where women were cloistered and he didn't know where she was. And his depression overtook him. He couldn't sleep at night. He was in so much pain. Obviously, I related to this on so many levels, right? The doctors had no cure. People avoided him. He became so despairing, he lost all hope. And then one night, he just was in this throes of the suicidal thought that he wanted to escape. And he went out, and he went to this described as the marketplace. And all of a sudden, this guard, they called a watchman in those days, started chasing him for no reason. And the man started running, and the watchman raced after him, trying to trap him. And this man, this lover seeking his beloved, says, "Surely this watchman is a tyrant of men seeking to harm me." And this watchman pursued him, and he barred every passage. And other watchmen, other guards, for whatever reason that this man couldn't understand, they all came together to chase him. And then finally he went down this alley, and he came to a wall. There was nowhere to go. This was the wall. And with the intensity of his, the pain to scale this high wall, he scaled it, he jumped it, and he threw himself down to the garden on the other side. And in that garden, he found his beloved. And then the lover said, "Give glory to the watchman," because he aided this ailing soul to the heart's physician. And he said to himself, if I could have looked ahead, if I knew what was going to happen, I would have seen the injustice and the tyranny of those guards chasing you for no reason as justice. Because if I could see the end in the beginning, I would see peace and war and friendliness and anger. And this story was just spoke to my heart so much because it said to me, whatever is happening, if it makes no sense, if it seems unjust, if it seems agonizing and you feel like you're running and can't escape, there is something of meaning that will happen because of that. And one of the beautiful things that has happened to me in my life is adopting my son. And I love this quote. This is actually on my mom's tombstone. And it says, "Love is the one means that ensureth true felicity both in this world and the next. Love is the light that guideth in darkness. It is the unique power that bindeth together the diverse elements of this material world, the supreme magnetic force that directeth the movements of the spheres in the celestial realm." In other words, gravity is the scientific expression of God's love. Everything that binds us together, human beings, our earth, our universe, is God's love, and that is gravity. And my son, I adopted after many, many years of agonizing infertility. And so this was just one of those beautiful blessings. How much time do I have? I want to make sure I'm not going too, am I way past my time?
I've got you to about 33 minutes, and I do see that there's some questions in there.
Okay, okay.
And I just want to keep listening.
Well, I am happy to make this presentation available if people would like it. So let me just see if there's anything else I need to say that I haven't said. Let's see. See. So I'm just going to conclude with this because this speaks to the religious scriptures of the past and how they share in the Baha'i view. And we think about Christ's words, I have yet many things to say unto you, but you cannot bear them now. This idea that in the future, Christ's spirit would reveal this message that would unfold. And the Quran says something similar, that divine truth is set down in due and ascertainable measures. And in other words, in according to the capacity of people at that time. And the Bhagavad Gita, I come and go and come. When righteousness declines, O Bharata, when wickedness is strong, I rise from age to age and take visible shape and move man with men, succoring the good, thrusting the evil back, and setting virtue on his seat again. The same echo of he comes in every age. So this is my last slide. And so for centuries, followers of every religion have awaited this fuller measure of God's guidance in the world. And Baha'is believe that that is now in the time of fruition, and that this message of world unity and the unity of humankind is the fulfillment of that promise. So I'll conclude there because I know I've taken up a lot of time and take any answers and questions.
Thank you, Julia. Yeah, there's a bunch that have come in for you.
Okay, so let me stop my share. Q&A is where I look for them.
Yes, ma'am.
Sure. So there's a question about for some reason this individual didn't, from where he was from in Texas, they never ate milk and meat together. And is there a health reason for that? And
I'm sorry, Julia. If you scroll down, there should be some
okay.
open questions that
Okay, thank you. So quickly, I think this is the first one. With the imminent unification of humankind, will there be a new manifestation of God and a new messengers to facilitate that? We believe Baha'u'llah is that messenger for today's age, but absolutely this message continues to unfold. There will be further manifestations of God to guide us in this promised age. There's still going to be more guidance as we progress, and that will be an infinite progression from the Baha'i perspective. This person asked, just to clarify, do you believe that all those holy figures, Jesus, Moses, Muhammad, were perfect beings? If so, what would you say of the mistakes that Moses made, such as the killing of a slave handler, for instance? I think that's a brilliant question. Yes, they were all perfect beings. Perhaps once they received the intimations of their mission from God, and each of these manifestations had that time. If I remember correctly from the Bible, Moses, the burning bush, and Jesus, the dove. Muhammad, I believe the angel Gabriel spoke to him. So there was a time at which they received this knowledge of their mission. And so my personal response to Moses being killing a slave handler would be perhaps that was one of the mysteries of God, that he maybe one of the tests for humanity, that this person received this message. Can you see that message beyond this mistake probably he made prior to receiving the intimation from God. So I guess what I try to say there is that within that imperfection, perhaps there is a wisdom. And yes, I do believe, and Baha'is do believe they were perfect beings. If we can make that distinction make sense. I hope that question responded to that. This person says, I absolutely believe men and women are viewed equally in the mind of God and equally important to the family. Can you clarify in what way do you personally believe men and women are equal? Do you believe there are specifically feminine and masculine roles, or do you believe that men and women can do things equally? And in what ways do you see men and women unequal in the law today? This is a great question. So Baha'is don't believe that we have to be equal, we must be the same. Being different, we can, just as human beings from different races and different cultural backgrounds, this doesn't take away from their fundamental equality. So yes, there can be specific feminine and masculine roles. Certainly, as I mentioned, women being the prerequisite to peace on earth basically speaks to our unique role as mothers, as nurturers, as facilitators of communication. I mean, these are things that women are strong in. So that to me is believing that men and women are equal and yet different. And in what way do I see men and women unequal in the law today? Well, and I mean, and perhaps in the law of the United States, there's no mandate for us to be unequal, but we can certainly see that we don't have, on the political level, on the international scale, we've not had the influence of women the way we should have. So I would say that even for Western societies. And obviously in the law of many other places in the world, there's not equality granted. Um, let's see, this person says, do Baha'i adherents retain a concept of an expected future Mahdi involved with bringing about a unified humanity and age of peace? And that's what I mentioned earlier. Absolutely. There is a future promised one who will come after Baha'u'llah. And this person says, I love the idea that true science and true religion agree with each other. I'm a student of electrical engineering and physics and have found so many parallels with religious principles. I love that. And they say, I am wondering if you could tell more about how your religion sees God and the principles of science and nature. Why is this idea so important? I mean, I can just speak to as an individual observing, meditating nature, how many truths can you see? You look at water, the life-giving force, it cleanses us, it nurtures us, we must have it. And look how it malleable, it moves, it doesn't fight against things. It shapes and yet it doesn't it accepts a shape, right? So it's almost like this idea of us as human beings without having conflict, how much more life can we bring to each other? I hope I've answered that. That was a quick answer, but yeah, I think looking at science and science in the broader sense, the investigation of reality, as we learn about light, for example, we learn about the spectrum of light and all the scientific principles of light, and then we think of these manifestations as being light givers. How much more do we know about what being a light giver would mean if we understand all the capacities of light? So I think that perhaps is the way that we think religion is illumined by science. I mean, I'll pause there not to intrude upon the next speaker's time, because I think that, oh, excuse me, what are your main books for studying the Baha'i teachings? There are so many, and this is one of the beauties of the Baha'i revelation. There's books upon books upon books. I've not even read them all. And Baha'i.org has infinite information about that, and you can find those books there. All right, I will pause there. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share with you.
Thanks, Julia. Speaking of books, I did have a comment. My oldest daughter, has been reading Soul Boom, Why the World Needs a Spiritual Revolution, written by Rainn Wilson from The Office. He's trying to spark a discussion about the spiritual tools that we can use to further the maturity and spiritual wisdom of wisdom and growth on a global scale. How do you feel that this book has been received by the Baha'i community?
I mean, Rainn Wilson is beloved by the Baha'i community. We love him. He has so much, his humor, his insight. So yes, this is a very well received book by the Baha'i community, and he's a known speaker at Baha'i events, and as I said, very beloved. So I think we would embrace that wholeheartedly.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Julia.